Okay, let's go back to, do I not have anything up here? A name, oops. Okay, here's Evernote. All right, so here is the Evernote. And at the bottom, this was the part that I wanted you to have done for today, because I'm going to show you the JavaScript for 1A and B. And down here, oh, let me refresh this because I think I put him on there. Yeah. Okay, here's the HTML for 1A that we did in class. I thought I for sure put another one. Let me see. Yeah, I did. Here's the other one, but it didn't sync because I have to shut this off. Okay. Okay, I gotta open it up again so it'll sync for y'all to have it. Okay, so down here at the bottom of Evernote, you should see another one that I opened up, chapter 618. Because if you go to page 245, problem 1 was to create the logic for a program that calculates and displays the amount of money you would have if you invested $5,000 at 3% interest for 1 year. And then you were supposed to create a separate method to do the calculation and display the result. So the main function on part A actually has only one statement in it. What does it need to do? The main function, because you have, I think I have it open already here. Here's the one. Okay, so in the JavaScript here, the function is at the top. If you were doing pseudocode, it'd be the same way. But everything that you want to do, the calculation and displaying the result, are done inside the function. So what needs to be done in the main? This is the main section in JavaScript. But if we were doing this in pseudocode, I think I have a pseudocode one open. Okay, here it is in pseudocode. All right, so this is the function, and then down here in the main has a call to the function. That's all that has to happen in the main. But see, whenever you come into a browser window, it's going to ignore this function, and it's going to go to the main and execute display investment. So it says, oh, there's function display investment. I'm going to initialize my variables. Then I'm going to calculate, which this isn't correct, though. It would be initial, if you do it this way, initial times interest, right? And then output the total. Then return to main. Well, there's nothing else to do because I've already output the total, right? So this is the part A. And this is how you do it in JavaScript if you use those variables. Now, you can use other variable names, do it different than that. They used, in this one that we did yesterday, we used a constant in here. But you notice that there's just a call to the function called calculate total in the JavaScript. It's actually the same as this pseudocode. We just gave it a different name in the JavaScript, okay? Which really, it's better to copy exactly what your pseudocode is. So any questions about the function here? You guys need to understand this before you can do part B. So this is called, no, the function is above the main, and it's just that in JavaScript, you don't use the word main in there. You can, but it's not necessary. So the program actually starts right there. Right here. Oh, you're fine. Right here, right where it, at the calculate total. That's the first line that it sees. So that's the call. This right here is the call to the function. And it's not passing anything in here. How many of you took the quiz? We take the quiz 6. Okay. Do you remember it told you what the difference in arguments and parameters are, right? So whenever, let's see, that's 5. So when we get to that part in our textbook, we're going to cover that here today. But on page 214 in your book, it says a data item passed into a method from a calling program is called an argument to the method. So if we put something in between these parentheses, which we're going to have to on our part B, right? That would be called an argument, and it would be passed into the function that it called.
Like how?
Well, we're going to do that. Well, I'm going to show you that in just a second. Because here, okay, I just want to make sure that you understand this one is a function that passes nothing and returns nothing. Because everything is done inside the function. So if I run this program, it's going to print out. This is your total 5150, and it stops because it made a call to this function. It initialized the variables inside the function, not inside the main, right? So that's important here in a minute too, for you to know whether these are local variables or global variables. And there was a question about that in your quiz also.
If you wanted to have like a variable in the main for the function, would you pass it through the argument?
Yes. That's what we're going to see in part B. Okay, so the way it is here, everything is done inside the function, so there's nothing to give back to the main, right? It's all done there, which is what part A said to do. Y'all get it, or you just don't know what to ask? Y'all see what we did? You guys? Okay. The nod helps. All right. So now part B tells us to modify the interest calculating program so the calculated value is returned to the main program where it is displayed. Okay? So what it wants to do is it wants you to go ahead and do the calculation here, but it wants you to return this total and not print the line out, not display the result inside this function. So the display is going to be below the function. It's going to return and display it. So in order to return a value, I have to have a variable in my main to hold this value. Okay? So did anybody write this? No? Nobody's messed with this? Okay, so if we were doing it with these same variables, okay, I'm going to set up a variable of a different name here. I'm going to call it, oops, variable, let's just call this amount. And I'm going to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to set amount equal to whatever's returned. So it's going to execute this function without passing it anything because they're all defined up here. It's going to calculate total amount, but
you have to set it equal to 0.
the only reason you do that, yeah, you can declare it. You can say variable. You don't want it as a constant because you're going to calculate amount, right? So here I'm going to take this one and I'm going to move because it wants us to display in the main program. I'll put it here, but what else has to change? it has to change to amount, right? So right here, I'm going to say amount. So now, how do I return it? Well, it's very simple. In JavaScript, I simply say return total. And now what will happen, see, the variable total ceases to exist once this function ends. So if I didn't return it into amount here, it would be gone. Okay? Yes?
I'm sorry, this is kind of off, but I don't know if I missed this word. Why did you set the variables equal to 0?
Oh, up here?
Yeah, and well,
And up here?
Yeah.
Because you want to be sure that when you start putting something into that variable, that there's nothing already in there. Because in computer memory, you've named a section in memory in the computer total, but you don't know if there's some garbage out there. Okay? So to make sure, we set them equal to 0, and then we know there's no problem. Okay? All right, so here, do you understand that this variable, even in order to get this into this function, I have to return it into a variable that is known in the main function. Because when I call it here, and this executes and creates total, when it ends, that's gone. So if I don't return it back here, and see what this equal sign is saying, assign what is returned to my variable amount. Okay, so here's how you can tell too. If you want to see how this works, you can go up here and put an alert total. And then when you come down here, you can say alert total, and it should be 0 because, or it won't know what it is, right? But if I say alert total, comma, amount, actually what it does in this alert is it doesn't even give you anything because it doesn't know what total is. There's no such thing as total when it gets here. So if I run it, JavaScript alert, 5150. So that's up in my function, right? And then it stopped because it didn't like that alert. I think that's what it is. Because it should print out. I'm going to comment this one out.
If the total's already returned by then, why does it know and not know what it is?
Because,
document, right? Oh, because you already assigned it as amount.
yes. So now, let's see what it does now. It should work. Let's see. Save. There's that one. There it is. See, it didn't know what total was, so it wouldn't even do that alert box. Okay, so we get the same answer as we did in 1A. It's just that our code is different. How we're using the variable that we calculated is different.
Why would you do it
like that? Like the second way?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes, this is just to show you how that works, because there's going to be occasions when the program is a lot bigger that you want to return a value back to the main. That's really more common than calculating it and displaying it in the function. Functions are more to do calculations and do tasks that you want done, and then you can code all of it and get it working, then bring it back, and then your main just has the output.
Is there called the functions normally more than once in a program?
Oh, yes. And that's what we're going to see here in a minute.
Especially like in loops and stuff like that? Or
in what?
Loops and
Yes. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at the PowerPoint, and y'all need to be sure you're paying attention and not working on problems, because you'll have plenty of time to do that. You need to be able to ask questions if you're not understanding, okay? Because this part, if you took the quiz, you probably went over this. Hopefully you read the book. But here is where we're going to start, is with page 214, creating methods that require parameters. And if you ever want me to go over your quiz, I did that yesterday, I think, in my class, because they wanted to see what some of the answers were. But this gives you the definitions that are on page 214 and 215. It tells us that a data item passed into a method from a calling program is called an argument. And we're going to see how to actually code that, okay, here in just a minute. Then a parameter is the method where it receives the argument into a parameter. So when we were looking here, anything in here, which is the calling program, is called an argument that it passes, but when it goes up here, it's called a parameter in the method that you're sending it to, that's receiving it, okay? So then, arguments and parameters are closely related terms. The calling method sends an argument to a called method, and the called method accepts the value as its parameter. So what's the synonymous term with method? What are we using in JavaScript? Function, correct. And so you have to remember that in this book, they're using method because that's pretty much a generalized term for functions, methods, subroutines. Different languages call them different things. So, but in C++ and Java and JavaScript, all of those languages use function, okay? So as long as you remember, those are synonymous terms. Okay, so in creating methods that require parameters, for example, let's look at on page, at the bottom of 214, it gives us an example, a real life example. When you make a restaurant reservation, you do not need to employ a different method for every date of the year at every possible time of day. Rather, you can supply the date and time as information to the person who carries out the method. The method that records the reservation is carried out in the same manner, no matter what date and time are supplied. If you design a square method that squares numeric values, you should supply the method with a parameter that represents the value to be squared. So rather than developing a square 1 method that squares the value 1, a square 2 method that squares the value 2, and so on, to call a square method that accepts a parameter, you might write a statement like square 17 or square 86 and let the method use whatever argument you send. Now, let me show you an example. I think that the example of that is on the Google Drive in that Chapter 6 examples folder. Oops, come on. I have my mouse, so I'm going to be a little... Okay, there was a folder that I gave you all called Chapter 6 Examples. I thought I had the square one there, but maybe not. Come on, let me open it. Okay. There it is. Let's try this one. I think this one has it. Okay, this one's being done with sum, which is the same thing, basically. Okay, here's where my main starts. And what I've done here is I have actually 3 functions. Okay, I have one function called sum. So what do you think that function is going to do? If it's called sum. Add 2 numbers. Good, Aaron. Okay, it's going to add 2 numbers. What's diff going to do? Minus. Good. It's going to subtract 2 numbers. Product is going to multiply 2 numbers, right? So rather than write the code in main, I have 3 separate functions that is going to do that. So remember when we talked about at the beginning of this chapter, we talked about a to-do list, and we said, okay, today I'm going to do the laundry, do homework, clean the bathroom, whatever. And so I didn't write the details to do those things, but I wrote what I was going to do on the task that I wanted to accomplish, okay? So that's what I've done here. I've established my variables that I'm going to use. I've asked the user for a number 1 and a number 2, and then I'm going to make a call to a sum program, a call to a difference, and a call to a product. So more than likely, I'm displaying the results in these because I'm not returning a value, right? I'm displaying the results in the function. But what are these called? What did we just say? If the program is calling another program, what are these values in here called? Which one?
Synonymous? No.
Oh, no, method and function synonymous. So what are these terms? You had them on your quiz. So, okay, parameters are the one up at top, so you're close. These are called arguments that are sent to the function. Okay, so up here, function 1 is sum. So here's what this function does. It's actually initializing a variable. Instead of having it separate declared, it's just doing it in the statement. Okay, so it's saying this is a variable named addition that's going to hold the num1 plus num2. Now, why is in the main, it's called number 1 and number 2, right? But it's called num1 and num2 up here because number 1 and number 2 are not variables that are defined here. So they're not known as those names, but the value, it's called passed by value. So the value that's in number 1 is passed into this one, and the value that's in number 2 is passed into this one as a parameter. So they are arguments that are being passed here, and then it does this calculation and then writes out sum equals plus whatever that value was plus break. And then it returns back down to the main, and in the main, what's executed next? Difference. So now it's going to go up to the difference, or diff it's called, but the value is called difference. So it's passing those same 2 numbers into this function, only it's subtracting, and it's going to print out the difference, right? Okay, then it goes back down there, and it says return, and it returns right here. So the next one it calls is product, and it passes those same 2 numbers to product, only it multiplies them and prints out the product. And then it comes back down, returns to the main, and it's done. And you might say, what's the purpose? Because you still have all that code in there. But if you have another program that you want maybe just the sum, you can pull that function out of this program and put it in another one.
But just like copy and paste it, or can you just call it from the
Well,
program?
actually, in our case, because we wrote it, you have to copy and paste it. But like in C++, you can actually catalog it in a library, and then you can call it and include that library. But we don't do that with JavaScript. But we do use some predefined functions, right? We've been using toFixed, and we used is not a number, right? So here, if we run this, it should go in there, enter the first number. Let's say it's 4. Enter the second number is 7. And there it says the sum equals 11, difference equals a -3, and the product equals 28. Now, that one did not return any values, right? And the one that we want to do, if we want to go and print all of them out, or just say we wanted to print the difference inside here, what would I need to do? So I wanted to return the value up here from my difference program. Where's it at? Right here. Okay, let's say I wanted to return difference, and I wanted to, let's just say that I want to do another calculation here. Variable, there's a variable mult that I've already got defined in here. So I'm going to return difference, let's see, to another variable called, let's just call it sub. Oh, I can't because that is there. I'll just call it a subtract. Okay, variable subtract. So I'm going to say down here in difference, subtract equals. And so now difference is going to go into this variable, right? So let's say I want to take that mult is equal to subtract times, let's just say times 10. Okay, so I'm going to do something with that value, and then I'm going to say document dot write line this is returned diff by 10. Oops. And it would be MULT. Oops, MULT. Well, okay, so let's see what happens now. So if I go up here and I run it, enter 3, enter 2. Sum equals 5, difference equals 1, product equals 6, and then inside my main function, only I didn't spell correctly, this is returned from diff function and multiplied by 10. So the answer was 10 because the difference was 1, right? And I said multiply 1 times 10. So you need to play around with these so you understand how to return values, how to pass values, how to work with them in main, because this next section on our PowerPoint is where we can modify. You remember the first day we talked about objects. Display address info says it's a method to display a message preceding the name and address on the bill if the balance is over 1,000. So they want us to change that program. So we need to do an if statement in it, right? We need to put an if statement in there. We need to rewrite the program to eliminate the display address info method and place all statements within main. That's one way. There's 4 approaches. We can retain the display address info method, but make the balance variable global by declaring it outside any methods. Okay, so where did we talk about global? Up on the top of page 214 talks about global variables. That's variables that are known throughout the whole entire program. Okay, so how do we make global variables? We don't usually use them very often, but then that's why we're not going to do it that way in this case. But if you make your variables inside your specific methods, then that makes your method what's called portable on page 214. That means it's self-contained. And what you were asking, Nick, about being able to copy and paste it. You can only do that if you've put all your variables inside that method or function that you need. If you put them down in main, then the program that you're going to use it in may not have those same variables the next time. So if you want your functions to be what's called portable, then you need to include the variables that you need to make it run inside that function. So here it's telling us that we want to know, and this is figure, what is this? Figure 6-3, which is on page, where is that? This one. Okay, it's over on page 213. This is the billing application with constants declared within the method. So right here, if you look at this method, display address info, they've changed the output lines to be variables. Line 1, line 2, line 3. Now, you notice that they're declared inside that function. But if I didn't declare them there, then I could not I couldn't use this function again. So they declared them there, but whenever you go back to the main right here, what's line 1, line 2, and line 3? Once you go back to the program to execute it, these were defined here. So what happens to them when I return? If I don't display them here, these cease to exist once I return back to my main. So if I don't display it here, if I declared them here, but I didn't output them here, I couldn't output them up there, right? So now what it was talking about on the next example on page 216, figure 6-4, they wanted us to also print out a message for the person's bill that says, okay, their bill's over $1,000 or it's not, okay? So they put an if statement over here. Let's see if I can find, where is that one? There it is. Okay, so that one, they've put an if statement in here. So they still have string line 1, line 2, line 3, but then inside this function, they've declared a variable limit is 1,000, and then they've declared another string message. This bill requires immediate attention. So here's the if statement inside the function of if amount due is greater than limit. Now, where did amount due come from? Where did amount due come from? Passed, right? As a argument into this method from over here in the main program. So here's the pseudocode, maybe a little bit too small. Let me see if I can make it a little bigger here and move it over. Okay, so in my main billing program, I've got string name, dumb balance. Those are my declarations. Then I ask the user for a name and a balance, and then I make a call to display address info, and I send the balance, right? So I'm sending it as an argument into this function. Now, in our book, they put the functions at the bottom and the main at the top, right? So everybody can write this one in JavaScript, right? So this one, if we want to write that in JavaScript, you know how to do it, right? Okay, so it's got a argument that it's passing in, and then it's also doing an if statement in the function, and then outputting. So it's still not returning a value, it's just passing an argument into the parameter amount due. And if you saw it run, this is what it would look like. It would say enter customer name, enter customer balance, this bill requires immediate attention because their balance is over $1,000. Then it would print the address, put the customer and their total balance. So that would be their bill sent to them. Okay, so next, oops, let me make this a little smaller again so I can see the slide. A method can receive a parameter that must include the following information in the header's parentheses: the type of parameter and the local name for the parameter. So what it's saying in Dreamweaver, I'm sorry, not in Dreamweaver, in JavaScript, when I passed these two, you notice in the function, I didn't have to put var, but a lot of languages, what that's saying, require you to put var num1 and var num2, but it doesn't like that in JavaScript. Notice it gave me an error when I did that. But some languages require you to do that. It would rather that you do that here, but you don't even have to. JavaScript doesn't require you to do that, okay? So where did we get to? Okay, so that shows us how to pass arguments and parameters. Now here's the other one that you should have had a question on. There was a matching in your quiz. Pass by reference. What's the difference between pass by reference and pass by value? How have we been passing? This last program that we looked at, was it whenever I passed amount due into balance or balance into amount due, what was I passing? The value of the variable or the reference? Well, actually, I was passing a copy of what was in there. So that means it was value. It was a copy of the value that was sent to that method. And see, every time you name a variable, what you're doing is you're allocating a specific location in memory of the computer, temporary memory. And you're saying, okay, I'm giving this one the name amount due, and I'm going to pass it a copy of it, whatever was in here. I'm going to pass a copy of it into a variable in memory called balance. So these are two different memory locations that are allocated. But this one is just stamping a copy. It's like a copy and paste into this variable name. Okay? Pass by reference is where you pass the address of the original variable and it's sent to the method. We're not going to write any like that. You actually, in different languages, you do it differently. And so, like when we deal with arrays, that's one of the best ways to pass by address, because you pass a position in the array to another array. It's a little tougher. That's why I just want you to know the difference, but we're not going to actually code any like that. Okay, that's whenever you get into a language that's a little more high level. We want to do the basics so that you don't have to learn the basics again whenever you go to the programming languages. But passing by reference is different. A variable in the calling method can have the same identifier as the parameter in the method header if it's being passed as a temporary placeholder. The parameter is redeclared with each method execution. Here's an example. Okay, here's one where this is figure, what is this one? Figure 6-6. This is one where my value is declared there and it's still the same name over here. That one they did by the argument is passed by value and it shows the sample output, but they're using the same name. I don't like to do that because it's kind of confusing, because it should be local, and when they use the same name, it's not It's not really determined that way. Here's where if you run the problem, it would say at start of main, my value is 18. At start of add 86, my value is 18. At end of add 86, my value is 104. At the end of main, my value is 18. So what they did, they passed 18 into this function as my value. They did a calculation with it and they output it. But if you go over here, that's a different my value. So it's still 18. Because they did it here, but when they didn't return this my value to the main. Really got to think hard. It's confusing. Okay, so like what it's saying is right up here in the main function, I've set my value equal to 18. Then it says make a call right here to add 86 and pass my value. Well, when I do that, I pass my value. Go up here where I can see it. I'm actually add 86 says output at start of add 86. My value is my value is 18. Okay, right here, it's just saying, okay, it's 18. I've gone over here to the function called, oh, these markers are terrible, add 86, and I've passed it, and it's actually my value, and it's 18. But then inside the function, I change it. I add 86 to it, so it's 104. So now over inside here, it's 104. So when I print it out right here at the end of add 86, my value is 104. But does it say to return it? Does it return my val here? No. So when I come back after add 86, what is my val over here? Still 18. Okay. So even though they use the same name, it ceased to exist what it was in add 86 unless you return it. Okay, so add by reference has some things called implementation hiding. That's over on page 220. An important principle of object-oriented programming is the notion of implementation hiding. It's the encapsulation of method details within a class. With implementation hiding, you make a request to a method without knowing the details of how the method works. For example, when you make a restaurant reservation, you do not need to know how the reservation is actually recorded at the restaurant. Perhaps it is written in a book, marked on a large chalkboard, or entered into a computerized database. The implementation details don't concern you as a patron. And if the restaurant changes its methods from one year to the next, the change does not affect your use of the reservation method. And so that's a way that it's saying implementation hiding. That's just saying that you don't know when you pass it to it. Like a predefined function, to fixed, we didn't care how it changed it, right? We just sent it there and said, make it 2 decimal places. That's an example of implementation hiding. Methods parameter list. Parameter types within parentheses in a method header. So that's where I was just showing you that you put var num1, var num2 when you pass it. You have to tell if it's a string or a var. But in JavaScript, it doesn't require you to do that. And that's called the method signature. What we saw in this pseudocode here, this is called the method signature. The name of it and what's passed is called its signature. That's what they're telling you there. then calling method needs to know the method's signature and what type of return data to expect if you're going to return it. So passing by reference, these are the things that you would know, and we're not going to do the one passing an array by reference, and that's why they have you go over that. You can list arguments in a method call separated by commas. We've already done that. Pass arguments in correct order. This is what's very important, is that you pass them in the correct order because they're going to go to that program. See, look, in this particular one, they've not got it in the correct order. So what happens is balance is going to go into, or I'm sorry, this is in the correct order. Balance is going to go into amount and rate's going to go in rate. But if you had those switched in your call and then they were in this order in the function, then it would put the rate in amount and the balance in rate. So you have to be sure they're in the correct order. Okay, here's the one that B is in your exercises and also your part 2. This is what you have to be able to return a value. So variable that's declared within a method ceases to exist when the method ends. So to retain the value, you have to return the value to the calling method. Return type must match the data type of the value that it's returned to. In other words, in our program over here where we return the value to AMT amount, if I had defined this as a string, I could not return total into it because total is a numeric, right? So it's saying that the data type must match. You can also return nothing, which is called a void method, and that's what the first one that we looked at was. Okay, so here's one where they're returning a value, hours equal get hours worked. So over here in this method, they say num work hours, please enter the hours worked, input work hours, and return work hours. So they're using a function just to prompt the user here for how many hours they worked. And then it comes back and it goes into the variable hours, just like we did in our total and amount routine. So there's the pseudocode for the payroll program. So here's one. Here's an example of code where it actually doesn't store the value. See, it says get hours worked times pay rate and put the answer in gross pay. So the problem before that, it put what was input here into a variable called hours, and then it did the calculation. Well, it's just showing you here that you can use the result of this function that's returned, work hours, and multiply it times pay rate and put it in gross. So you only have one statement. So they used the call in the same, statement as they did the answer. So then they only had to output gross. Well, I think I have this one coded too. Okay, methods can contain multiple return statements. So that's something else it's showing you here, figure 11. This is another one with if then else's in it. We're not going to do the passing array method. Okay, this is what we're going to do next week is the overloading methods. We're not going to talk about that today. That's where we're going to stop in the chapter. But I want to do a couple of more examples and show you. So next time we're going to cover overloading methods on page 232 and to the end of the chapter. But before we do that, we're going to look at a couple of the examples that are here in that chapter. I think I have this one. There's the salary program. I think that's the one that I want to show you. Okay, let's go here. Here's function return is 1. Okay, here's one where all it's doing is returning the product. It's doing all the input here, and this is just what we did on our other program. So this one is in that examples folder if you want to look at it, but we've gone over ones just like this, so I'm not going to talk about that one. See what the other one was. Open. Chapter 6. Okay, it's this one that I want to go over, I think. Yeah, okay, here's the one that I was asking you if you could write the code for, okay? This is the function display address info. Remember we had this in our book. So it starts here. This is the one where we were supposed to modify it to print this one just prints it out using variable line 1, variable line 2, variable line 3. So this matches the pseudocode 6-3 example in your book. So here we have main starts here, variable name, variable balance, name equals prompt, enter name, balance, enter balance, and then we actually converted it to numeric by multiplying times 1.0. Then it says to make a call, and I don't know why I have that commented out, to display address info. So it'll make a call to this function, and it'll print out the address, and then it's going to write the customer name and the total. Okay, so this one should match our pseudocode. Enter the name. This is my bill. Enter the balance. Let's say I have a 1200 balance. And there's my total. And there's the address. ABC Manufacturing, whatever. All right, so let's look at the second one. I think this is the other one, I hope. Let's see if this one is. No, that's the same one. I thought I wrote it with the if statement, but I didn't. Okay, let me look. This, I think it's the salary one that is that payroll. Let's see if maybe it's this one. Let's see what this one does. Okay, this one actually has, it's that payroll program. So it says, it has 2 functions in it. So here's the main. This is a pretty long one. We have salary 1, salary 2, net salary 1, net salary 2, tax rate is 10. Salary 1 equals get salary and pass 30 and 10 to it. So if we go up here to get salary and we pass 10 as the hours, the pay rate we passed was 1. So we say if hours are less than or equal to 40, which they are, then salary equals hours times pay rate. So that should be what it calculates that first one with. And then it returns the salary to sal 1. Then it prints out sal 1 equals. Sal 2 gets salary past 45 and past 10. So up here it should go to the else portion and say pay rate times 40 plus 1.5 times pay rate plus hours minus 40. So that's the calculation for the salary for the second one. So then it prints out the second salary. Then it says net sal 1 equals get net salary sal 1 and tax rate. So I go to this one, and that's the net salary. Okay, so if I print this one, it didn't ask for any prompts. It said salary 1 equals $300, salary 2 equals $475, net salary 1 is $270, net salary 2 is $427.5. So you need to look at those and make sure you understand those. Then if you look at what your assignment is project, remember this is the one that I won't be giving you a project for on objects. That's what, oh, I did all those. That's what this at the end of Evernote is. It says, now be sure you've done your Khan Academy section on functions. We will cover overloading and predefined methods on Tuesday of next week, and we'll also cover this problem. So be sure you've posted it in Google by Tuesday. Create the logic for an application that continuously prompts a user for a numeric value until the user enters 0. So it's going to have a loop that the sentinel value is what? What does it tell you to continue the loop until what? Till the user enters. Did y'all read the problem? No? What does it say? 0. So we're going to loop until the user enters 0. The application passes the value in turn to a method that squares the number and to a method that cubes the number. So the main method prints the results before reprompting the user. Create the two methods or functions, they're called in JavaScript, that respectively square and cube a number that is passed to them, returning the calculated value. Okay, so I've showed you an example program that's pretty close to like what that one would be. What was that example one? Remember the example one I showed you? It didn't sum and square. What did it do? Was it this one? Where it summed, calculated the difference, and then calculated the product, right? So that one would be one that you could use, because all you need to do in this part is square and cube the number, right? Okay, so I'm going to call up on Tuesday. I'm going to look at everybody's. We're going to pull them up, each one, and see how each one of you did it differently. So be sure you have that done, something, even if you can't get it working, so that you have something that we can look at on Tuesday. And that's the only way you're going to get credit for it, is if it's done on Tuesday, okay? I want you to spend some time so I know who understands functions and who doesn't, all right? And then we'll work on it some more, because on the final, you're going to have to understand functions. And there's no need in going into arrays until you understand functions, okay? And I'll help you understand it if you do some work on it at home, okay? All right. Unless you have some questions, we're done.